My name is Lisa Fain, and I am the CEO of Center for Mentoring Excellence. Before we go any further, I want to just introduce our guest today. It's November. Here we are in the month of thankfulness here, at least here in the US. I know we have some international folks here as well. So we thought, what better time to be talking about gratitude, and more specifically, the link with gratitude and mentoring. And when Michelle and I brainstormed this topic, I thought, I know exactly the guy. Who is that gratitude guy? David George Brooke is known as that gratitude guy. He's been a speaker, a coach, a best-selling author for over 25 years. He is a former Nordstrom store manager and managed in the corporate world for over 30 years. He's local here to the Seattle area. His published works include the book that he'll be giving away at the end, That Gratitude Guy's Daily Gratitude Journal, Monday Morning Minutes, 6-word lessons to embrace gratitude, and a number of other books on gratitude. And as a result of his passion for illustrating the wonders of a gratitude mindset, he has presented over 850 speeches and workshops in the past 9 years, including over 150 Zoom presentations in the last 18 months. He was recently featured in Forbes and my husband's favorite publication, which is the Costco Connection magazine. And he travels nationally and internationally to deliver this important message. He's got a great YouTube channel with over 1,800 gratitude videos, and thousands have seen his message. He's now considered a leading authority on how living a life of gratitude can enhance and improve your life personally and professionally. David Brooke, welcome to the Thought Leader Conversations.
Lisa Fain, thank you so much. Sometimes I hear that and I go, who wrote that anyway? Holy cow. I gotta meet that guy. I'm very passionate. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I am very passionate about the subject of gratitude, as you know, and I'm always trying to spread it around. And of course, Thanksgiving in the month of November is a great time, but all year round as well, because I tell people that you and only you choose your attitude. And you can choose an attitude of gratitude every single day, and it'll make you happier, healthier, and lighter. And I'm here to show and tell you why, to show you how it works.
Cool. Well, I know that your initials are DGB, but your initials are also TGG, which is that gratitude guy. Right. How did you become that gratitude guy?
Well, it kind of started with, it actually goes way back when I wanted to be a speaker, long before gratitude was ever a factor. Back when I was at the University of Washington, a teacher asked me to come and speak at a high school about how to be successful or whatever it was. I was 19 years old. And I went and spoke to the high school, and remember being all nervous and having a glass of water, and my mouth was dry, and did best I could for like a half-hour talk. But I went back and got in my car, and I was 19 years old, and I thought, that's what I want to do someday. I want to be a speaker. And it took me 45 plus years to get the gumption or whatever, the courage to go out and do it. And I happened to be managing a Lowe's store at the time, and left about 10 years ago and decided to pursue this career. So I always wanted to be a speaker. And because of the fact, and I used to bring this up a lot more, I don't as much, but just because of a lot of tragedies. I had my mother died when I was in my 20s of cancer, and my parents had gotten divorced, which was tough. And then my dad took his own life. And then later I got married and had my 2 sons, and my wife passed away, and she died of a prescription pill overdose, which was very sad. And so I kept thinking, well, I'll get into this speaking thing. And then because a buddy of mine said to me, have you ever written in the gratitude journal? And I, like a lot of people, didn't know what it was. And I said, what's that? And he goes, it's a journal you write in every single day about everything you're grateful for. I went, wow, that sounds interesting. So I got one on Amazon and started writing in it. And the more I wrote in it, and this is one of the central themes, and whether it's gratitude or mentoring or anything about how you're focusing on your blessings and abundance, it just really made a difference. And I just noticed that my whole mindset was better every morning. It takes me 5 minutes in the morning to write in that journal. So as I was speaking, I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do on speaking. I'm going to be talking about gratitude. So I would go out to chambers of commerce and Rotaries and Kiwanis and Lions and prisons and hospitals and schools and different places. And one day a guy comes up to me, he says, I've heard of you before. You're that gratitude guy. And I went, wow, that's a pretty clever little name. Let me just, kind of steal that. And so I just decided to make it my brand. I even registered the trademark and everything. And that started maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And then it's just built from there. And I've done all these talks, and I do coaching, and I sell the gratitude journals. But the big thing for me is the speaking. And especially when we went through the pandemic, you mentioned a lot of the talks I did there. You get the feedback. It's pretty good. I mean, you get virtual hands up, high fives, thumbs, all that kind of thing. But there's nothing like quite, being in person. And so whether it's virtual or in person, either one of those modes, I've been able to reach. I've talked in Australia and France and Italy and all these places because of Zoom. So it just became this passion. And now I feel so fortunate to be doing this, because the old line about when you do something you love, you feel like you never work another day in your life. And that's what it feels like to me. So it really has been a lifelong passion that came to fruition.
I love that. Well, as this community is a community that's centered around mentoring, I'm curious, having pivoted from kind of store management to speaking and the gratitude, what sort of mentorship did you get in that regard?
Well, I think there's a little thing called the association evaluator I do, where I tell people that once or twice a year you should evaluate your relationships. Mm-hmm. And there's three things to get a disassociate with somebody, limit your association with somebody, and enhance your association. And then number 4 is be a mentor and get a mentor. And so I think back on my mentors, and particularly at Nordstrom was such a great example, because everybody started at the bottom. Nobody started at the top. And like later at Lowe's, I started right as a store manager. So that's much different. But at Nordstrom, so the mentoring piece was huge. And you always had somebody who was kind of your go-to person. And as you moved up the ranks, and Nordstrom did something that was really interesting. So you were encouraged to really meet with your mentors once a week and listen to them carefully, take notes, do all that type of thing. But Nordstrom did something that was really fascinating. I'm not sure how many other companies have done this, is you didn't apply for a job, they picked you. And so they would know if you do a good job. I'll ask Lisa and Michelle and a few other people, who do you recommend? Well, we think this Dave guy. And then they call you and they go, you got the job. But what they didn't tell you is that because of the relationship with mentors and people that are above you and then further down the road or up the ladder, if you will, it was really powerful. And I noticed sort of like, I would meet with them monthly or weekly and take notes and so forth. So it really was interesting, because in my 15 years at Nordstrom, I got 9 promotions, and that was just crazy. And I've never thought about that, because you don't apply, they just pick you. But that idea of not only mentoring, but sort of that person that's been further down the road, which is something. And so I've told people that to both be a mentor and to be a mentee is so important, because you're just passing on knowledge. And we can all read books and everything. And as somebody once said to me, if books were so powerful, why would we ever have professors in college? We just tell people just read the book, because every time I'd go to college, one course, we're going to do this book for the quarter and so forth. So the relationship was huge to me. And then the gratitude piece, as it ties into that, I say this all the time, gratitude turns what you have into enough. I'll say it probably 2 or 3 times today, because it's so important. It's how you frame things. So you've got to have the tools in place to take advantage of what you've learned. And so again, having a mentor to get you back on track when you've gone off the rails is really important, which made a big difference to me.
Yeah, I love that. You know what it reminds me of, David, is often when I'm speaking to groups, I talk about the pie model for career success, which comes from the research of Harvey Coleman in this book, Empowering Yourself. And he talks about there being 3 components of career success: performance, image, and exposure. That's what the pie comes from: performance, image, and exposure. So performance is like how well you do your job. Image is how well you're regarded. And exposure is exposure to people, resources, and opportunities. And when you talk about you don't apply, people pick you, what Coleman's research said is that exposure is actually 60% of career success. So often we think it's like how well we do your job, but it's actually not just who you know, but who knows you, right? That is so much a part of career success, and that really your own experience really speaks to that as well.
Well, and just in one quick, sorry, but just one quick thing. When you said 3 things, it made me think back on Nordstrom. They always had the 3-part triangle, so it was kind of similar, and it was productivity, customer service, and teamwork. And so they were all equally valued. And so productivity is easy. You can see how much you sold and how many sales per hour you had and so forth. Teamwork is how you're helping everybody else. And customer service is what you're doing for the customer, because they're the end all be all. But as I did find out later that I noticed that productivity did end up being weighed a little more heavily because when you
Yeah.
sell a lot, they like you when you sell a lot, because that's kind of why we're in business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, right? That's often true for performance management kind of things, is that
Right.
the productivity matters. And the mentoring, it's interesting because the image and exposure is so important. So I'm
Exactly.
curious, David, because you had mentioned that you've had some pretty, tragic experiences in your life in terms of, your parents and your wife and what have you. And then it's almost counterintuitive to think, okay, then he becomes the gratitude guy. Like, I'm grateful for all this stuff. So how does, if we're not, and by the way, the world right now is topsy-turvy for so many
Yes.
of us, right? So
Yes.
if I'm not feeling particularly grateful, how do I get to that place, and why would I even want to?
Well, one of the things is, and then I had this up earlier before we started, but this will be the gratitude journal I'll give away at the end. And that gratitude guy's daily gratitude journal. There's a little saying in the front second or third page. It says, if you think about it, it's like a dream. If you talk about it, it inspires you. But if you write about it, it empowers you. And
Mm,
so what do we do when we're having tragic events and things that are tough? Well, there's something about writing, and there's all these different ways now. You can go on the keyboard and you can press a button on your phone. You can say it'll type it out for you in a Word doc or whatever it might be. But there's something that they've proven through science that if I write in here, I am so grateful to Lisa Fain for inviting me and the help that Michelle Hancock gave me. I'm so thankful, and so forth. It plants it in your brain. So one of the things that I tell people is that the gratitude journal is essentially 5 minutes every day. And so if a person doesn't have 5 minutes, and I mentioned this on a talk the other day, that's okay. I mean, there's always going to be people that are going to be naysayers or going to not believe you or think, well, that's easy for you to say. But one of the reasons why I bring up the deaths and and there's a number of other really, really big setbacks I had, is because I want to prove I'm no better or worse than the next person. I mean, I've had this happen and this or that happen, and it's not what happens. It's not your action, it's your reaction. So to me, to write in the gratitude journal, there's a little thing called the daily number, and you always write your number, and that's kind of taking your temperature. Every time I write in my gratitude journal, the number goes up because I'm grateful for this. And what was my highlight of the day? That's another thing that's in the little template. The highlight of my day was talking to my younger son last night, and then doing another presentation yesterday, which I had a great response to. And so those are focusing on the blessings and focusing on the abundance. So really, and I guess that where I wouldn't say I get frustrated, but when people kind of will challenge me and, well, you think you've had it tough, I've had it worse. And I go, well, let me ask you something. Why don't you try a gratitude journal for a week and see what happens with your mindset? And you're not only thinking about it, but you're writing, and it's literally 5 or 10 minutes. But to write that down, I am so grateful for my health. I am so grateful for my sons. I am so grateful for the friends I have, things like that. It just almost changes your brain chemistry and makes you more positive. So I like the word challenge. I challenge people that are having a tough time to try the gratitude journal, focusing on gratitude, and especially the gratitude journal. And even after a week, and see if it makes a difference. In most cases, it does.
yeah. Here's a question that's emerging for me is like, one of the things that I learned in a recent experience in my own life is sometimes you got to be sad. Sometimes you got to be in grief. Sometimes you got to be PO'd,
Yeah.
right? Whatever it is. And so which some may term as negative emotions, but they're necessary. You're feeling them, right? So
Right.
how do you do that and be in gratitude at the same time? Like, can those things coexist? And is gratitude just kind of denying the negative stuff?
I think that's a great question, because I think that nothing is perfect. And I know that I've always said life is like this roller coaster. It's this huge up and down thing that goes. We all like to be up. And then when you're down, as I always say, nobody returns your phone calls. They don't get back to your emails. You don't have any friends, it seems like, and so forth. And so, but what's funny, I mentioned something that I do. I call this power hour. How do you start your day? And so you have this fresh 12 hours or whatever you have on your day. And so I start out with get out of bed, make my bed, drink a quart of water, go in and take my shower, shave, get ready to go, come into the kitchen, turn on the coffee maker, come in here, write in the gratitude journal, 5 or 6 minutes, stretch for 10 minutes, go back to the bedroom and do a meditation for 10 minutes, and then come in here and turn on the devices. So I tell people, so that's an example. It's about an hour. So that's an example of how I set up the day for the power hour. So you do that. So now you're kind of set up for success. So if you go through the day, you've already written in the gratitude journal and you're making a lot of difference. And somehow, to your point, Lisa, it's just not working today. And then I'd say to my fraternity brothers and friends would call me. They'd always go, I need a dose of the Brooker. And I'd say, well, have you written in your gratitude journal yet? So if they didn't, I'd hang up on them. And they'd call back like 10 seconds later. I think we got cut off. No, we didn't. I said, I hung up on you. Go write in your gratitude journal and then call me. I'll be your training wheels, but I'm not going to pedal your bike. So when you've done all those things and you're still having a tough day, to your point, and that's going to be part of life, this big roller coaster, you know what your goal is? Get to tomorrow. Because typically tomorrow is going to be better. If it isn't, you do the same thing and it's the same goal. And it might be a day in a funk. It might be 2 days. It might be something like that, but you'll pop out of it. But if you keep doing those things, you're setting yourself up for success, and you're setting yourself up for not having those days happen as often, which I think is very important.
Yeah, I love that saying. I'll be your training wheels, but I'm not going to pedal your bike. I think I'm going to take that. Is that okay? Can I steal that one from you? Borrow it from you? So let's bridge what we're talking about now, David, to the mentoring context, because I think one of the things that a lot of folks in this community do is really focus on the mentor-mentee relationship. And I'm wondering how mentors and mentees can infuse gratitude into their regular meetings or their routines. Any ideas for that?
Well, I think that not only mentor-mentee, but I think just in general, that gratitude should be a part of everybody's life because of the way it frames your life. And as I said, the gratitude turns what you have into enough. It's so important. And so I think that when I look at people that are, for instance, one of the things that I've said as a mentor to many people, having had many mentors in my life, and then having many people that I mentored, I go back to something I thought, speaking of just the impact that we have on people. I think raising children and managing people, and I once added it up, and I think I've managed about 10,000 people in the different stores and things. And I think the number one skill, and also as a mentor, is setting a good example. And if you don't set a good example, if you sit there and go, I better not see you smoking, but I'm puffing away, it just doesn't work very well. So the same thing was true with mentoring. And that's why I think the example piece is so important. I managed a Lowe's store in Mount Vernon, and the store opened at 6:00. And they fired the manager before me, and he'd roll in every day about 9:30. And I just felt I should be there at 5:30 when the store opens, even though I lived in Seattle. So I'd get up at 4 and get there. I just felt it was good. But when you're setting that good example, so I think, again, as a mentor, the mentee is going to look at that mentor and say, well, I see what you're saying, but I'm really paying attention to what you're doing. You're setting that example. And that's why I use the gratitude journal. I just can't imagine. These last about 3 months. And today was the last day of the one that was from August through November. And I just can't imagine not writing every day when I sit here and talk to people and tell them how powerful this gratitude journal is. So you have to set that great example. And in the same talk in Vegas, I was at the books table selling books and talking to people, and the guy comes out after the talk and he says, is this your gratitude journal? Your personal one? And I said, yeah, I keep it right by my briefcase. Mind if I look at it? And I said, well, sure. Don't look at it too closely if you don't mind. So he kind of thumbs through it. And he goes, wow, you write in this every day. I said, were you at the talk? Were you just in the hall? Did you just hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you, you need to write in it when every single day. But me, I'll just write in it when I feel like it. So I just can't overemphasize enough about how you have to set a good example. And I know there's the golden rule, which is part of that, setting the good example and treating those as you would like them to treat you. But I guess, and I'm almost stammering because I'm thinking about examples at Nordstrom and at Lowe's and things where once I had this one department manager come up to me and say he didn't understand why when all the boxes came into that department, he'd have all the people put the stock away and he'd go up to the coffee shop. And he goes, but nobody seemed to respect him. I said, well, what do you think? Well, I'm the manager. I shouldn't have to put the stock away. I go, really? So that's the way you look at it? That's the example you set. So to me, so much of it comes back to, are you living in truth? Are you setting the best example? Are you walking the walk and all that? Because the people watch what you do and they don't necessarily do what you say.
Yeah. I'll tell you what strikes me based on what you're saying is, when you write in your gratitude journal, you are specific. It's not like I'm grateful for Michelle, it's I'm grateful for Michelle for blah, 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 blah. And one of
Right.
the things we talk about in a mentoring relationship in terms of feedback is specificity, right?
Yes.
What is it that what is it that you did well specifically? What is it that you didn't do well? But I think the same can be true for gratitude. And I actually think, as I think about it, we always encourage mentors and mentees to have quarterly check-ins. How are things going? But I think quarterly gratitude check-ins would be a great thing too. Like, I'm grateful for you, my mentee, for always showing up, really eager to do things, sharing with me the lessons that you learn, right? And mentee sharing with mentor, this specifically what it is that they're grateful for about one another. And, not a bad practice to share what they're grateful for in the world at each meeting as well, right?
And the being specific is so important. I know that they would talk about managing people, praise in public, criticize in private. But more importantly, really, I mean, that's true. But even the praise, very specific. Lisa, I really appreciate the job you did in that display. It just really pops the colors. And I can't believe how many colors you got in that whole different outfit or end cap or whatever it might be. Instead of, yeah, you did a nice job. Talk to you later. And so it really makes a difference. And I just think back again on how many things I've learned from people that didn't do it the right way. I mean, you learn a lot from people that set a good example, but you're going to learn a lot from people that don't do it the right way and don't do what they do. And that's like that guy that would, again, would say, you guys do all the work. I'm going to be down here having a cup of coffee. So it's important.
Another quick share for you, also related to my husband, who happens to be on this call and to have introduced me to you, is we do every week, we meet about our finances, because we're both entrepreneurs and we got to make sure that the bills are paid and all the things. And so we would always come in like, oh, like we got to do this. We got to have this meeting, right? And then we're like, how can we make this more pleasant? And you know what we do to start out with? Take a guess.
Give 3 things you're grateful for the other person.
We just start one. We start with one. Like, what are you grateful for? One is good. Well, I mean, come on. We're achievers, but we're not going to overachieve quite that extent. But we do one thing that we're grateful for, not necessarily even about the other, but one thing that we're grateful for this week or right now. And it really has transformed the meeting. I mean, it transforms our mindset. It transforms the conversation. And it's it just occurred to me to share that with you, because I think it's something.
Oh, that's important. And I think also I'm judging from a lot of times the chat that I get after a Zoom call or along the way if I'm monitoring it. And one of the things I hear, and this is what's so important, because we are human beings and we have our foibles and our pluses and our minuses and so forth. But I noticed today and yesterday on the chat, a lot of it was, thank you for reminding me of this again, because we all get caught up. And we get caught up, the bills have to be paid. And so good for you and Dave for saying, what are we grateful for? But before we even start talking about, how about just the fact we're grateful we have the finances and the resources to be in this position as an example. But I just noticed so many of the comments would be that same type of thing. And I kind of lost track and I was feeling sorry for myself. I feel better today. Thank you for reminding me of this. And so it's, again, we are human beings and we're subject to all these external pressures and things. And I'll tell you, it's like another one. I used to watch the news every night, and now I don't as much anymore. And I'll get little snippets here and there. You watch the nightly news, and if you come away with that not being depressed, I'd like to know how you feel, because it's just everything is negative, and it's a sad situation we're in the world and so forth. So you got to constantly fight that negativity. And as I tell people, one of the things I used to say about the gratitude journal was that it gives you the best Teflon or the best armor, because we're constantly bombarded by negative gamma rays that are trying to get through our heat shield or whatever you want to call it to bring us down. Because people that, we all have had people in our lives, when I mentioned the association evaluators, certain people you want to disassociate with because you don't feel good after you talk to them. And you're not going to change the world or change them, but you can change your environment and not hang out with them as much. So important.
Yeah, I love that. I often say my desire to be well informed is directly at odds with my desire to stay sane.
Yeah,
so much happening here.
I like that.
I want to just invite, I'm looking at, I don't know all the names of the folks who are here, but I know several of them. I know there's a lot of wisdom in this room. And I'm curious if you have ideas about how you think gratitude can be incorporated into mentoring, share those in the chat. And if you have a regular gratitude practice, share in the chat what that is, as well as David and I continue our conversation. We'll refer to that as well. So again, if you have ideas about how to incorporate gratitude into your mentoring practice, share that. And if you have a gratitude practice of your own that you want to share, do share that in the chat as well. What do you think are some of the obstacles or the enemies of gratitude?
Well, I think our society is something you just mentioned. I like that. I'm going to steal that. You're going to steal something from me. I'm going to steal the one from you about
Okay.
my ability to be well informed, but also to stay sane because it's negative. And I think that, gosh, I mean, there's so many statistics that could argue about the negative side. I read something the other day that people that have a purpose, they get older, my age and up in this area, live 7 to 10 years longer to have a purpose. But also you have less than 5% of the people in this country do personal development. And I just think that's interesting. Personal development, making yourself better. You spend more money tuning up your car, changing the tires, rotating the tires and changing the oil and that type of thing. And so I think that you could even argue, and I think about it this much, I've lost not only the people I mentioned, but in the last few years, I've lost a lot of friends that have passed away and not all in their 60s or 70s, 40s and 50s and so forth. So this has an endpoint where we all pass on. So you could argue a lot of it is just built in to be negative. And I used to say it sounds silly, but I used to say if we live forever, it would probably make more sense. But that's not the way it works. So I think a lot of it is just there's just this negative bias, if you will, towards things. I used to say, I hadn't thought about this in a while until you just said that, Lisa. My feeling is if we were at a shopping mall and if Lisa and David Brooke were walking down the mall and asking 10 people, we're going to start Lisa and David's chocolate chip cookies. My contention is 9 out of 10 people will tell you, well, how stupid is that? It's like there's already all these cookies out here. Why do you think your cookies? So it's just negative. I mean, that's the way people are biased. So to me, I almost feel like gratitude helps you get back to having a positive attitude, gets back to zero, and then going up to be positive is even more important. And I come from a father that I'd say good morning, and you go, what's good about it? So I mean, it's just or like it's Sunday today, I'm looking out at Lake Washington, and I'd say it's a beautiful day. So he'd go, it's going to rain tomorrow. So that's just how some people are programmed, and I'm not sure they can change that much.
Yeah. When they see the donut, they see the hole, right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I had listened to and forwarded you a podcast a few weeks ago. For those of you who are also podcast junkies like myself, there's a great one called Hidden Brain. And the host was interviewing, and I can't remember the name of the gentleman he was interviewing, but the host is a guy named Shankar Vedantam. And they talk about the enemies of gratitude. And one of the things he talked about is, are you focusing on the headwinds or the tailwinds? Right? Are you focusing on what's pushing you forward or what's holding you back? And it's important to acknowledge both of them, but where you focus your time is really great and important. There's some great comments in the chat, so let me just acknowledge those. Julie, hi Julie, says, in our quarterly team meetings, we will often share 1 to 2 things we're grateful for about each other before starting. Fantastic. Gets people in the right mindset, right? Rachel says, I also have a gratitude journal and utilize a variety of resources for positive messages to share. We had time for employees to share gratitude with each other at the beginning of our all-staff luncheon just today. Thanks, Rachel. I bet that made a big difference in how people showed up for the rest of the time. Melanie says, I mentor people new to my company. I routinely share a personal and professional point of gratitude with my mentees and ask them to share one with each of me. It's led to some wonderful conversations and relationship building. I love that. Just as important as it is to share your challenges and your shortcomings, it is to share your gratitudes. Anita has a question, and she asks, David, how would you help someone grow to the point where they can feel gratitude?
Well, that's a good question. I get almost a challenge. It reminds me kind of a challenge question I get from people sometimes on Zoom and sometimes in person when there's some Q&A. And that is that my best friend just died a week ago. What do I have to be grateful for? And it's kind of like, okay, we're going to challenge the gratitude guy. But I think the same thing I would say in that case is if you are a runner and you fall down and you break your leg and tomorrow you're at the hospital and it's in a cast, you can't run for a while. So you got to go back to the basics. So pretty soon it's just the cast, and then pretty soon it's get the cast off, and then you walk, and then some point you jog, and at some point you're going to start running again, but you can't the next day. So how I would deal with that with the gratitude is start small. And people say, well, I don't have, of course, one of my classics, which I just love with people for so many subjects, and I think about all these employees I got to manage over the years, is I don't have the time. And as I don't have the time, I don't have the money. Those are probably the 2 tops you hear about a lot of things. And to me, we all have the time. It's just how we choose to spend it and how we choose to use it. So I will tell people that, back to my challenge to them is, okay, so this is 5 minutes. So how am I going to get some gratitude in my life. This is 5 minutes. Well, I don't think I have 5 minutes, or that's too much work. And I think that's baloney, but I tell them, okay, then just do me a favor. Let's start small. Will you promise me, just give me a thumbs up if you promise me you'll do this. And so I get a thumbs up. I say, start this week, and just every day on a piece of paper or on a bulletin board, write down one thing you're grateful for, just one word. And then stop, and then notice how you feel after a week. Every day you're writing, and then pretty soon then write down 2 things the next week, and then 3 things. And then the week after that, start writing a sentence, and then a couple of sentences, and then I get them into the gratitude journal. And the thing is, that works for most people. But I also think, because I was able to manage so many people, and I got a pretty good cross-section of just the average employee, if you will, there are just a lot of people. I don't know what the percentage is, of course, but you can't convince them of anything. I mean, there's certain people, like my father was the kind, as I mentioned, kind of like that. He was going to complain about anything, whatever it is. It's going to be raining tomorrow. So I think all you can do is set the best example. And I still think probably my all-time favorite cliche of all the cliches of the world is, you can lead a horse to water. I mean, there's only so much you can do. I can give them the journal, I can sign it, I can show them mine, see how I write in it every day, set the best example. This is how you can introduce gratitude in your life. And if a person takes the ball and runs with it, great, but there's always going to be a percentage that won't. And so in those cases, there's just not much you can do. But I do think that setting the best example as you can, as I said about don't tell them they can't smoke, and you're smoking, I think is maybe the best thing you can do.
Yeah. I have a
Thanks.
thought on that too. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Anita. Here's my thought I'm not that gratitude guy, and I'm not even that gratitude gal, but I am that mentoring gal. So I'll give you my mentoring answer to that question, well, there's 2. One is that laughter is a great entry point into gratitude, right? I think finding a way to laugh is really good.
Yes.
The other piece is to listen to the lamenting, and listen to the angst and the agony and the grief as a mentor, right? Listen to it, and then ask the question, how else might you look at things? What else might that mean? What's another lens to look at it through?
Yeah.
And they may not buy into it yet, because they might not be ready for it, but at least they can acknowledge that it's there and see it as an entry point. So yeah.
Well, I would think too, back to the mentor-mentee relationship. When you're trying to, what are you doing as a mentor? You're trying to take your experiences and your knowledge and pass them on to somebody else to maybe shorten their learning curve. But we've all had people that just aren't willing to do the work. And so I think there's maybe this cross section. I'm sure somebody's done some odds. They say out of 100 people, so many will and somebody won't. But I think that going back to this experience at Nordstrom and Lowe's is, I would just get so excited about people that were willing to do the work and really listen to me. And it's sort of funny. It's like another example that I think of is when I'm not so much if I'm doing a Zoom workshop, I do workshops for Boeing. And so these people have their pad of paper and stuff, and then they're taking notes. And yet I've had different people ask me questions where just one-on-one. And I'm like, I go, are you remembering all this? Don't you want to be writing any notes down? Apparently you can remember. It's either they have a great memory or they really don't think that much about what you're saying. But I think that it's just important. There's always going to be a percentage that get it and a percentage that don't get it. And that just goes with the territory.
Interesting. Want to remind people that you can continue to ask questions and share in the chat. It really adds a lot to this conversation. David, I'm wondering what you're working on right now. Like, is there anything you're working on that you're excited about or you want us to know about it?
Well, thanks for asking. I'm actually working on a new coaching program that I'm about 3/4 of the way done putting together. And that's called Encore Endeavor. And it's for people in their 60s or 70s, business owners that are now looking at retirement. And it's called Encore Endeavor, Fulfilling Your Greater Purpose. And it's about coaching people to what their next chapter is. And I think that it's just so important, because the purpose thing I talk about in my talks, finding yourself, find your talent, find your passion, find your purpose. So important. I contend the most important relationship you ever have is with yourself. Number 2 is your talent. Figure out what it is, make your strengths productive, make your weaknesses irrelevant. I can speak to 10,000 soldiers at Joint Base Lewis McChord with no trouble, but I can't draw a circle to save my soul. So I'm not going to take an art class. Figure out next what you're passionate about. What did you want to do when you grew up and never got a chance to do it, or whatever? And then I think if you get a connection with yourself, and then the talent, and then the passion, you'll get your purpose. and people with a purpose live on average 7 to 10 years longer than people that don't. And so I'm helping, and it'll be launching the 1st of January, but just getting people that are in that position of, and it isn't even financial. I know David Fain would appreciate this. It's the financial piece is a big part of it, but that's not the only part. And that is what is your purpose? What are you going to do? And I had a friend of mine that worked at Boeing, and she said all the time people would retire and they'd show the retirement little notice, and it said Fred Smith, left wing assembly, retired, and then they'd have a piece of yarn and go to the other side of the bulletin board 3 or 4 months later was the obituary. And so that's something that I'm really excited about, because I want to help people with that purpose. And certainly gratitude is a big piece of that. But I'm specifically looking at people that want to get the next chapter and just don't want to go golf the rest of their life.
Yeah, I love that. So Julie asked a really interesting question. I don't know, David, there's a tool that we call SWOT analysis. So for those who don't know, it's picture taking a sheet of paper and you divide it into 4 sections, and there's SWOT, SWOT. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, where you identify what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and those are the internal pieces. And then externally, what are the opportunities and what are the threats? And Julie asked a great, an insightful question. She says, do you think that having your mentee do a SWOT analysis, a personal SWOT analysis, could help them identify what they're grateful for? Any thoughts on sort of identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and how that might tie into gratitude?
I think it would be like any of those assessments, and you look at the Myers-Briggs and different things like that. I think it's extremely helpful. And when I just mentioned about finding your talent, I just think it's so important. As I said, I can't draw a circle, so I'm not going to take an art class. But I think when you identify what that is, it's just puts you in the right direction, if you will. And I think and some of the assessments, I don't know if I believe as much, but I think so many people are looking for their direction. And I think that in this could help somebody to realize what they're grateful for just by focusing on it the same way writing it down in the gratitude journal makes it so much more powerful. And by the way, just a quick question or quick comment on that. The other thing I like about these gratitude journals, which is so helpful, it's just like people that have written in journals all their life. I kind of wish I'd had a journal my entire life. And I have about 50 of these because I've written for the last 10 or 15 years now. But it is so helpful to go back and look what you wrote. And so to think about where you've been, because a lot of times where you're going is dependent on where you've been and what your experiences are and so forth. So, but getting back to the SWOT analysis, I think anything is the strengths and weaknesses. And in fact, in Nordstrom, we always euphemistically call them strengths and opportunities. And there's opportunities there. We could never say weaknesses. That wasn't supposed to be said. But I think, but at the same time, I think you need to be realistic. If you're 115 pounds soaking wet, you're probably not going to be an NFL quarterback, but you could be a jockey at the racetrack, so think about how the square peg fits in the square hole as well. But any of those things I think help, because we're all trying to figure out what our strengths are and where we fit in so many cases. And that's why another thing I think that gratitude, and you didn't ask this, but I'm going to volunteer it, that really helps is I can't tell you how often I deal with people that suffer from comparisonitis. And this person's got this house, better car, better girlfriend, better boyfriend, bigger vacation, in like this club I used to be a member of at the Columbia Tower. Everybody started their sentence with, just got back from so-and-so. How you doing? Just got back. And I just got back from Tukwila. I got a good deal on some power.
Tucwila's down by the airport for those who are not local. Yeah.
But it's funny, nobody cares. I mean, and so anytime you can create a better relationship with yourself, focus on your strengths, don't fall victim to comparisonitis. But I will say this, and this kind of comes back to, somebody says, how can they feel gratitude? Writing in the gratitude journal, it gives you, I already said this, but it's so important. It just gives you this great Teflon. It gives you this great armor. You just don't care that much what other people think. And there's so many people keeping up with the Joneses, whatever term you want to call it. I just got back from France. We just got back from a cruise. Nobody cares. And in fact, it's so funny because and I just did this on this talk about listening. It's so important to listen really carefully. And I tell people, use tell me more and then what? Those 2-3 word phrases when you're talking to somebody, just be quiet and just listen. Tell me more. They'll stop at some point. But you know what people do? 2 people are talking and the person comes up, the third person comes up. Hey, how you doing? And they go, well, Jim was just telling me about how his trip to Hawaii was with his wife. 9 times out of 10, the person that walks up goes, oh, that's so interesting. Jill and I just got back from Hawaii too right now, but we're not talking about you. I've actually had to stop somebody. Hold on just a second. Hey, We're not talking about you, okay? He's going to finish telling us about his trip, then we'll talk about you. But people they have this need to insert themselves. So when you are grateful, you develop great armor and you don't feel this need to have to tell them you just got back from Hawaii because now you feel better about yourself. Or as I like to say, are you trying to convince you or me? So anyway.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I actually think, like, as I think about Julie's question about a SWOT analysis, right? Focusing on your strengths can help you, develop your confidence, and focusing on your opportunities. And I'm not talking about opportunities as a euphemism for weaknesses. I'm talking about opportunities as like what the potential is, can help you develop optimism and hope, which are probably gateways to gratitude. Having said that, like, I think maybe, there's this, there's like positive psychology, and then there's the view that positivity can be toxic, and like focusing on being positive. I'm not sure that being grateful is the same as necessarily being positive, right? It's just appreciation. So I'm interested kind of in that interplay as well.
Well, and it's funny too, wordplay. I mean, just different things. And like I think it was Saturday Night Live where Al Franken or something, and I feel good about myself and I am a good person. And it was one of those, and they were talking about how silly that kind of seemed. But yeah. I just think for me, the foundation of gratitude, I mean, what are we talking about? You're focusing on your blessings and abundance. You're focusing on all the good things, and you're getting away from toxic emotions like envy, resentment, anger, all those types of things. And you're focusing on the positive. It's so important. You asked this earlier, Lisa, but it's such a great point about how it doesn't mean every day is going to be perfect. There's no life, no perfect situation that every single day, hour, whatever it is. But if you can increase the percentage, isn't that like a lot better to have a lot more good days than bad days, and ones are really being positive? It seemed to me it would be.
I love it. I think it's I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh,
yeah, that's what it was.
And gosh darn it, people like me, right?
That's exactly what it was. That's funny.
Exactly. So in the meantime, other than writing in your gratitude journal, what other exercises can people do to focus on gratitude?
Actually, let's do it. Let's do a gratitude exercise right now. And this will actually be an interactive with all you need is a piece of paper and a pen. So hopefully all of those in attendance can do this. And what I'd like you to do is, in this gratitude journal, I talk about the daily number. So what I'd like you to do is pick a daily number for how you are right now. This is like taking your temperature. So 1 to 10. 10 is the best day of your life, and 1 is a terrible day. So wherever you are, and you're not going to share this with anybody, so don't worry about it, but write that number down and put a circle around. You could be, you're doing pretty well, you're 8, 8.5. You can do halves, whatever that is. Pick that number. And again, you're not sharing it with anybody, so it could be very private. All right, next, 1, 2, 3. You're going to write 3 things underneath that. Number 1, what's the number 1 thing you're grateful for? What is the thing that all by itself, you could only pick one thing? Put that down at number 1. And then number 2, what is the second thing you're most grateful for? Put that down at number 2. And this is to the exclusion of everything else. Number 1, if you can only pick one thing. And number 2, if you could just pick a second thing. Put that down at 1 and 2. Okay, now number 3, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. What was the highlight of your day yesterday? What was the best thing that happened to you? You might have to think about it for a minute. Today we're approaching noon, so yesterday, Monday, the 13th. What was the best thing that happened to you yesterday? Put that down at number 3. Switch to gallery because I want to see this. Okay, now it took you 30 seconds to write those 3 things down. I want you to reread those 3 things and plant them in your brain. Number 1 thing I'm grateful for, the number 2 thing I'm grateful for, and then the number 3, what was the highlight of my day yesterday? And after you reread those 3 things, I want you to write another daily number underneath there. And it could be the same number or it could have changed. But whatever that is, write another daily number underneath those 3 things and put a circle around it. All right, now I only see a couple of cameras. Most everybody's off camera. So with the actual reactions, virtual reactions, give me a thumbs up if your number went up from the top number to the bottom number. Thumbs up to the actual virtual thumbs up. Melanie, Jennifer, Marnie, David Fain, he's famous, Kenesha. Holy cow, if I had my little buzzer would go, that was easy, because that's how fast. So the question is, thank you all for participating. Thanks for all those. Vanessa, I think you had your hand up too, thumb up too. That's how quickly. So that's a 60-second example of what writing in a gratitude journal can do for you. So imagine if that had that much of an impact on half a dozen people, I'd say maybe half the people on the call. Imagine what 5 minutes can do every day. So, but that's an exercise I do a lot. And when I'm in person, I have them do it on these little cards, and then they keep the card with them. But there's several more like that, but they're all designed to keep, because I'm a very positive person and I really want to extol the virtues of gratitude, but I'm also realistic to understand there's going to be some days and times that things aren't going well. These are designed to help you through the tough times when you can look and remind yourself of those 3 things you're grateful for, or look in your gratitude journal, and all of a sudden it can turn around a tough day.
I love that. I love that. Well, my number went up, I have to say. And, you know, I got a gift from somebody a few years ago. That's a line a day. It's a 5-year journal. It's like a line a day, you know, and I write in it every night before I go to sleep. And initially I was like, I'm just going to do this as an experiment. I'm on year 5 now, by the way. Like I got it 5 years ago.
Wow.
And it's just, I don't always write what I'm grateful for, but I always write the highlight, which I guess is the same. I hadn't thought about it being a gratitude journal. And it's so great to look back on it and say, you know, very often I'll say, oh, we were doing this a year ago. We were doing this 2 years ago. This is what happened here. It's really, really terrific. So I love that. Thank you. And this actually is an exercise that mentors and mentees can do together for sure.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
That's really terrific. I want to just invite any questions or comments from the folks who are here. You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself as you see fit. So my question is, people are thinking, David, is have you missed a day over these 10 or 15 years? Are you at 100%?
Yes, I will answer that very honestly. I have missed a day from time to time, and then I make 2 entries the next day. So
yeah. Oh, you make up for it.
I go back and pretend, because things have happened, and I go back and pretend where I was thinking, what I was doing the day before, and fill in the one. So it's a perfect attendance. But a couple of times I've had to go back and rewrite that day, because I just think it's so important to have that consistency.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Julie says she can't wait to start her journal again, and she's going to have your tool now to do it. Rachel says she appreciates the conversation and the ideas shared. SWAT for gratitude is a fun one. Jennifer, no questions, but I appreciate all the thoughts around gratitude and the focus on blessings and abundance. Excellent. Well, I want to do a couple quick things. First, I want to just share, David. Well, let me ask you, David, while I'm sharing this, any final thoughts, comments, anything that you want the folks on the call to leave with today?
I would just say the biggest thing of all is just give it a try. And that's why I said, I mean, sometimes asking for somebody to buy a journal for $20 and to make a 5-minute commitment every day, maybe that's too much for people, who knows? But I just ask people, just give it a try and start with something as basic as writing 1 word every single day for a week. And you're talking about that 5-year journal already, Lisa, and I'm sure those 5 years have gone by fast, but just try the 1 word. And then after that, try 2 words, and then maybe a sentence, and so forth. And just note your mental attitude and see if an attitude of gratitude doesn't make a difference. And 9 out of 10 times it will.
Excellent. Excellent. I love that. Well, as you can see on the screen, oh, Melanie, before I do that, we would love to hear your gratitude practice. Do you want to unmute yourself and share it?
Sure. I'm not sure I can figure out how to do the camera thing. This is a lot of tech for me, but I just wanted to say I'm a really visual person. And so I have a practice of taking pictures of things, because all of us have a cell phone in our pocket. And so I take pictures of things that spark gratitude for me. And it can be people, it can be animals, it can be nature. A lot of times for me, that's the key. And I keep those handy. And the beautiful thing about it is that tech helps us with that. When you have Google Photos, not only do you get them and you can look back at them when you remember, but you can also be reminded annually, because it brings up your photos all the time for you to be reminded of things. So it's this never-ending fountain of fun gratitude sparks for me.
Ooh,
Thanks.
Melanie, I love that. Thank you. I love
that's fantastic. A picture's worth 1,000 words. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's marrying the left brain and the right brain. That's fantastic. Yeah. Really terrific. Okay. Well, as you see here, there are lots of ways to get in touch with David, and I really encourage you to check him out. If nothing else, check out his YouTube channel. He's really got some great gems there as well. David, I can't say thank you enough. What a joy for us to kick off November here, and think about gratitude as we enter Thanksgiving for those in the U.S. and just a reminder of thankfulness for those who are not. But it's always a month for gratitude, right? Thank you for the nuggets of wisdom. For your time, for your easy yes. You're getting all sorts of appreciation in the chat that I hope you read and relish. And I want to say thank you to our community as well. We're grateful for you at Center for Mentoring Excellence for being part of our community. We're grateful for your commitment to mentoring and for the time you gave us this month and every month that you join. And in the meantime, David, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Such a treat. Such a treat. Thank you, everybody.